After so much on the project going wrong, we finally had a moment of good fortune. This was that our neighbour's son, who is a general contractor with a background in groundworks, had just had a project get pushed back a couple of months, so he was quite keen to find some more work. We definitely had work for him, so we brought Jack over and he had a look at the project and gave us a quote. He basically offered to rebuild the entire extension for us, but we ended up agreeing to a place where he could get the project back to where I thought it would be 2 months ago, which is that the steel was erected on appropriate foundations and all the brick walls were back up. Lily and I talked over his quote, and despite it adding about 40% to the projected cost of the entire project, we agreed to not look a gift horse in the mouth. And besides, I really didn't have any appetite for driving a digger around in our back garden again anytime soon, so we commissioned him to start work. This gave me about a week to take the remaining brick walls down, which I rushed to do before he arrived. When Jack and his crew showed up the next week, one of the first things they did was board everything up. They put boards down in our car park, which was quite a nice idea because it meant we didn't have to have a skip, and instead could have all the waste taken away by a grab truck. They had a digger delivered, and this funny little diesel-powered wheelbarrow kind of thing that sounded surprisingly like a flock of geese whenever it was driven, and kept dropping ball bearings, which was quite alarming. The three of them began clearing out the site and getting it down to the existing foundations, and it became another couple of days of the stress that the project had been for the past couple of months, of beginning to wonder, are these foundations really not good enough? Can't we just reuse them? Wouldn't it create a load more waste to not reuse them? But after consulting with the building controller, and finally the structural engineer again, we were told no, it all has to come out. So the boys got digging. The project suddenly moved incredibly fast. And in spite of some of Jack's alarming straddling with his digger, it all got dug out really nicely, and the building controller came by and inspected the trench.
Yeah, good. No roots or anything, is there?
They got the trench dug so quickly and efficiently, and the grab truck came and took most of the spoil away already, that I even felt inclined to do a victory lap in the trench before they filled it all with concrete. Their work was so well timed that the concrete came on Friday, which gave it the whole weekend to set up. It was pretty interesting watching this mix-on-demand concrete being delivered to our trench, and trying to guess how much went in it. It ended up being about 7 cubic metres. And the concrete was all poured and levelled before lunch. Later that day I couldn't really resist the temptation of wet cement, so I snuck out there and decided to draw a little picture of Frisbee into the foundation while it set up. With the concrete having the entire weekend to go off, next week's project was putting the steel up. I wasn't really sure how they planned to erect it. They had some genie lifts delivered to help raise it up, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be a matter of loosely bolting it all together and then trying to raise it from the ridge beam from the genie lift, or whether they were going to try and do it individually. One by one was the much more obvious answer, so in advance of this I made this block out of some scrap plywood that I made to be exactly the same size as the ridge beam and match its bolt configuration, as I thought that would help us erect the steel in the right place. It was absolutely mind-blowing seeing 3 strong men just carry this steel beam that caused us so much trouble. But they pushed it up and got it bolted to the house very effectively. My block ended up coming in really handy, and we got the second one against the house up in position as well. And then we used the genie lift to raise the ridge beam up into position, slowly slipping my wooden block out of place so the ridge beam could slot in. It was all happening incredibly effectively. Next we moved on to the far legs, which were a bit more troublesome because there wasn't a wall to lean them against. Jack tried first seeing if we could lift them with the digger, but there wasn't quite enough reach on its arm, so we ended up taking a different approach. We got the beam basically into place when the heavens opened and just started pouring on us, so I tried to encourage the lads to just come inside and get out of the rain for a minute, but they insisted that it wouldn't be safe leaving it like that until it was at least bolted in a couple of places, so they ended up getting soaked while I stood there in my yellow French fisherman's jacket watching them. Getting that beam in made it a bit more sturdy though, and it made the last one to go in that little bit easier, and suddenly the steel frame was standing upright. We checked it for level, and everyone was so pleased to see that it was absolutely spot on. Jack did a great job pouring those foundations, so we didn't have to use any kind of packing or shims to get it level. And then the last thing to do for the day was to chem fix the bolts in and get it bolted down to the ground. The next day the welder arrived and he got straight to work, which was quite impressive. It felt a little bit like the blind leading the blind at the start, because it was just me, the welder, and one of the labourers, and the welder clearly thought that I was one of the labourers as well, until he had one of his own sent over to help with the project. I'm really glad that I didn't record more of this process, because it was absolutely terrifying. Even with the genie lifts, it felt so precarious raising these steel beams that were at least 100 kilos each up into place, and then watching the welder just tap them together and then brute force adjust them into the correct position before welding them all up neatly. It did all get done though, and I was very relieved at the end of the day that finally the steel was up and secure and safe and was in a place where it wasn't going to hurt anyone anymore. The steelwork had to be put up in this order so we could get the blockwork put up around it, and that would allow us to lay the slab. The slab was a bit more manual. We didn't get a truck this time, and the boys just mixed up the cement manually. I was really pleased with myself for this camera angle. Now I had that steel beam perfectly centred above the slab, I clamped my camera up to the top of it to record this shot, which went very well until I realised I had to get it down. The boys were just packing up when I was wrangling with this problem, and I decided the easiest answer would be to prop the ladder up against the ridge beam to climb up and go and collect my camera. Of course, a small disaster struck, and I managed to drop the ladder into this freshly laid concrete slab. So Jack tidied it up, they all left for the day, and once again temptation got the better of me that evening when the concrete had set up a bit. I figured that the chance of me having an opportunity like this again was pretty minimal, so I decided to just go ham and start drawing whatever came to mind in the slab, attempting to cover the entire thing. I was doing this at dusk, so I didn't really get a good picture of it once it was done, which was a bit of a pity because the next morning the bricklayer arrived, and the cement was still so soft that basically all of my drawings disappeared by the end of the day. It was all good progress though, and all that was left to do was the bricklaying, which I didn't get too much footage of. There was a bit of consternation about it because I asked for the bricks to be relaid in Flemish bond. My friend Tom had pointed this out to me, and it kind of explained what I never really liked about the brick wall when it was in the house. These walls were made with genuine old stock bricks, but they were laid in running bond, which is the quickest and easiest way of laying bricks, but not the way the bricks ever would have been laid when they were originally made, so that made it look a little bit funny. The bricklayer did agree to laying them in Flemish, and then when it came to actually laying them, he spent a while trying to talk me out of it on account of how much extra work it would be, and how many more bricks it would waste. I ummed and ahed over it, then decided that I'd rather put the attention into the detail, and we went with Flemish bond after all. And I'm really glad I did because I think it looks really good. So in the space of 3 weeks, the professionals got the project all the way from its absolute disaster point of having no idea what I was meant to do with it, to back where I wanted it to be in the middle of August, ready to start building the roof out of some timber, which is much more in my comfort zone than this steel ever was and ever will be. Thanks for watching, keep it real.